What is energy? In science, energy is defined as the capacity to do work, which simply means the ability to make things move. Energy is either used or released when an object is moved from one position to another. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, which means it's conserved. So that means the amount of energy in a system is always the same. But what can happen is that energy can be changed or it can be transformed between different types. Energy can also be moved or transferred from one object to another. Defining what energy is can be a little bit confusing, so let's look at some different types of energy so we can start to see some examples. So what are the different types of energy? Well, there are two types. There's kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy is energy that an object has because of its motion. So any object with mass that is moving through space has kinetic energy. Big things, small things, if it has mass and it's moving, it has kinetic energy. So this includes planets, aeroplanes, cars, people, water flowing down a stream, grains of sand blowing along a beach, oxygen molecules drifting around the room that you're in. All of these things have kinetic energy. The amount of kinetic energy something has is a product of how fast it's moving and how much mass or how heavy it is. So for example, a fast moving car has more kinetic energy than a slow moving car, and a heavy falling object like a piano has more kinetic energy than a light falling object like a raindrop. There are a few different types of kinetic energy as well. The first type is called translational kinetic energy, which is basically just movement through space. So an object with translational kinetic energy is moving through space. So when you walk across a room, your body has translational kinetic energy. Now the faster something's moving, or the more mass it has, the more translational kinetic energy it has. There's also rotational kinetic energy. So the spinning ball in this animation has rotational kinetic energy. Now a heavier ball or a faster spinning ball would have more rotational kinetic energy. Sound energy is another type of kinetic energy, and it involves the vibrations of particles in air or another medium. So sound is caused by vibrations that travel through this air. Now we'll be studying sound and sound waves later on in this topic in a bit more detail. Lastly, we have thermal energy, and this is another very common type. It's also one that we're going to focus on quite a lot in this topic. So an object's temperature, how hot or cold it is, depends on the vibrations of the particles it's made up of. So faster moving or vibrating particles gives an object a higher temperature. Potential energy, so the other type of energy, is energy that's stored in an object due to its position. Potential energy also applies to objects of every size, so from massive things like stars and planets to the very, very, very small atoms that make up everything in the universe. And again, there's a few different forms of potential energy. The first one is gravitational potential energy, which is energy that's stored in an object that's lifted above the ground. So the weights that are being lifted in this animation gain gravitational potential energy as they're lifted up. And the higher up they're lifted, the more gravitational potential energy that they have. Elastic potential energy is stored in things like springs or rubber bands, things that can be compressed or squeezed and will spring back into shape. Electrical potential energy is caused by the attractive or repulsive forces between electrostatic charges. So batteries, for example, store electrical potential energy in this way. Energy that's stored in chemical bonds is called chemical potential energy, and this is the type of energy that's in the food and fuels that we use. Atoms can also have nuclear potential energy, and this is energy that's stored in the nucleus of an atom. This type has the potential to store an enormous amount of energy, and that can be used in the production of electricity or in quite destructive things like nuclear weapons.